Okay. All right. We are live. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of This Week in Drones. Thanks for joining. And while we're live, we want to create as much dialogue as possible, as much of a two-way conversation as we can. So, as usual, send in your comments through the comment section, whether you're watching on LinkedIn or YouTube. And we'll try to get to some of those. We'll pull them up as we can through the conversation and answer your questions about today. We're focusing on drone as first responder, how law enforcement agencies are using drone technology for, creating much safer environments, for responding quicker to 911 calls, for search and rescue, for coverage over events, and to really make people's lives safer, both the law enforcement agents themselves and also the citizens. And there's some really cool stories that some of our guests here are going to share with us today. And so we've also got some callers, and I'm excited to bring them up throughout. So we'll hear from some other really interesting folks today. So with that, I'll say a brief introduction, as most of you know me already, and then I'll kind of pass it along, probably just like Matt and Michelle next, and then Matt, Rowland, and then Charles, I'll let you land it with the intros. But David Lewin hosting today, and then also with Echodyne radars. So any insights that I can share on what we're seeing from a technology perspective on DFR and airspace awareness, I will bring to the table in the conversation. Matt, you want to share a few things?
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be back. Matt Sloane. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer with Skyfire AI. I've been working in the public safety drone space for almost 11 years now, and particularly in DFR since the very beginning of DFR. So excited to be with you guys and help contribute to the conversation.
Awesome. Michelle?
All right. Hello, everybody. Glad to be back as well. My name is Michelle Duquette. I run 3 Mad Air. It's a new consulting firm. My perspective is kind of to make sure that we are talking clearly to one another and that we are recognizing that there are many ways to attack a problem. And I'm hoping that we are going to be able to encourage some healthy debate on drones for good.
Beautiful. I love it. I'll second that. If anyone out there would like to bring up topics that are productive, but perhaps questioning different perspectives, or if you have some things that are challenges to the industry or how we're doing things, please bring them up and we'll create healthy dialogue and debate. I love that. Matt, Rowland, do you want to give an introduction and a background about what you guys are doing with DFR and Fort Wayne Police Department, and and then we'll be thinking about some of the stories that you guys can bring to the table as well, and maybe we'll probably tag some of those after Charles is able to introduce himself and DroneResponders, but I'd love to hear from you.
Matt Rowland, Fort Wayne, Indiana. We started our drone program in 2017. We dove into the DFR starting in 2021 and then fully rolled it out in 22. And basically the last 2.5 years, we've been doing a DFR program with the visual observer on the roof. We started flying M30s on the roof. Now we're flying Doc 2s. Recently, in the last 2 months, we now have waivers to be able to fly without visual observers. Officer Mike Hickman is sitting next to me. We are up in the DFR suite here in the palatial penthouse in Fort Wayne downtown. And so we try to fly every day that the weather's cooperative. Today is a marginal day at best with winds and visibility and a snowstorm that just came through yesterday. So we kind of fighting through some of that today. But yeah, we've been doing DFR for 2.5 years. It was about a year that it took to kind of lay the groundwork to start the initial program. And then the waivers, some of them came quickly and some of them have taken a little longer.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Can't wait to hear more. And folks out there listening, you've got a great panel with real world experience setting up these DFR programs and actually running them real time while we're on the call, it would seem. And so please ask those questions specifically while we're live, because you get a chance to hear from these folks. With that, Charles, love for you to tee up an introduction of yourself and then share a few thoughts about DroneResponders and the resources available with that and the event coming up. And I'll eventually, while you're sharing, I'll get some of these callers queued up as well. So I may be dropping off here in a second, but go for it.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Charles Werner. I'm a retired fire chief from Charlottesville, Virginia, and the director of DroneResponders, which we started in 2019, which now has over 11,000 members, participation from 92 countries, and over 500 international members. Didn't quite see that coming. But I think when you work with everyone and you bring the resources forward, you see that people come. So DroneResponders.org was organized basically to help advance public safety UAS, providing information out there of how to do SOPs and getting information from other departments to help it advance more quickly. From that, we started the DFR working group, which is now a nationwide group, which has most of the agencies that have DFR programs that are involved. It's very interesting in that respect. And if you're interested either in starting a DFR program or you're in it, you're welcome to join. It's free. And it's headed up by Miriam Fox out at Chula Vista and Stephen Katz with Flying Lion. And I want to thank Echodyne for letting us all be here. It's great to be here, and I'm honored to be here with such great friends that I already know. I know Matt and I go way back to NFPA committees when drones were first being discussed. And I've known Michelle for a while. She's been working over at MITRE, and it's been exciting to see the work back and forth with that. And we are partners with MITRE now. Now she's gone off on her own to be, is that 3 Mad Air?
My parents had a sense of humor. I'm Michelle Ann Duquette. So those are actually my initials.
Okay, well, that explains it. So Matt Air, well, that's great. And Matt, he's been out there, we've known each other for years now and working through things. And I wanted to point out that first, Matt Sloane, I gotta get Matt 1 and Matt 2 now, was really involved in the early stages of Chula Vista. So very beginning of DFR. And so congrats on that, Matt. That's a huge legacy to be thinking that you were at the very beginning of what's now becoming probably one of the biggest police trends out there. And then Matt, he kind of followed my lead a little bit when he was working on his COA and it was still kind of stuck a little bit on DFR. And I said, hey, how about trying this Part 107 DFR waiver? And he did. And he actually became the first agency to get a DFR waiver under Part 107. And now he has both, because just recently, I think you're announcing that you got your COA approved as well. So it's great to see that. But DroneResponders.org, it's free for anyone who wants to join. It's open to academia, government, public safety, industry. And the idea is to share. And we have a dashboard that has over 1,700 agencies sharing their program information. That's a partnership we have with Esri and NASA. And we do have a Space Act agreement with NASA to continue working on development of how you fly safely in the airspace. With that, we've got one thing that we've started learning about DFR is that DFR has a lot of different flavors. So DFR is not like one thing. As Matt knows, and writing up the codes and writing all these things out, defining how these things work, they're all a little bit different, which is kind of exciting because we're seeing the development from the first stages of being really more of a law enforcement flight to get eyes on the scene in advance, all the way now to delivery of AEDs, tourniquets, Narcan to emergency scenes. And I know that's developing into the next phase, which we're going to learn about in our conference. I also wanted to point out that we do have a March conference coming up, March 11th and 12th. And we're going to be in Busch Gardens in Williamsburg, Virginia. And I know Michelle's going to be there. And Matt, you're going to be there, right? Right?
Yep, somebody from Skyfire. I don't know if it'll be me, but somebody will be there.
Well, can I put in a formal request that you come? I'd love to see you. So
you know what? Yeah, you know what? Let's try. Let's give it a shot. My wife's in grad school, so that's my only hitch these days. But I'll check with her.
Okay. And then Matt Rowland, you're going to be there on one of the panels too, right?
Yep. I believe that's the plan.
Yeah. So anybody's interested, go to DroneResponders.org. You better not wait too much longer because last year we had over 600 and 100 people on the waiting list, and we became the largest public safety drone conference in the world. I didn't see that coming either. But again, we have such a great environment. It's a great place to have it. It's not your unique, your normal hotel where you come and everybody kind of passes each other in the night. It's kind of really a really intimate setting. And we have some great vendors that are going to be there. And so I thought I would start, since David has left us, with some stories. And I want to go first to Matt. You want to talk a little bit about some of the highlights that you've seen now as a result of the work that you've been doing. Matt Sloane.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I guess we got to specify here. Yeah, no, I mean, look, I appreciate the warm words and the intro, and we've all been doing this a long time, and it really has been incredible to see where this has gone. So, back from the very beginning, talking to Fritz and all the folks, Chief Kennedy and Don Redmond and Vern over at Chula Vista, who have now sort of dispersed into the industry doing what they do best. Um, and so, I think what we continue to see is that the benefit of getting there 2 to 3 minutes before anybody else is what makes all the difference. And so, there's so many of these stories. We got there first, so we happened to see that, the person with the gun threw it in this particular bush, so we could go look in that bush and find the weapon. A couple of the recent ones that I've done that are, one of them is actually pretty funny. We got called out to an unconscious woman in the parking lot of a Little Caesars, and within 60 seconds we were able to say she was not unconscious. She was eating pizza, and we could see the pepperoni on the pizza. So it's a silly story, but it illustrates the point, which is that within 60 seconds, we were able to cancel police, fire, and EMS, and help people get back to running more important calls that day. So there's so many of those stories. I mean, I was just involved with one 2 weeks ago, where an officer was in an altercation with a suspect and couldn't get to his radio and call for help. We knew exactly where that officer was, and were able to direct other officers in to help him. There was another one just the other day, not even a week ago, domestic violence dispute, and as soon as he saw the first officer run in, he took off and ran out through the woods. And of course, we knew exactly where he was because we had the drone overhead, and the officers were waiting for him right when he came out the other side of the woods. So, I mean, there's a zillion stories like that, and I'm sure, Matt, Rowland, you've got a million of them as well. But it's really great to see, even on the calls where we aren't there first, but we're just there in an officer safety capacity. We've been working a lot of in a couple of our programs. We've been working a lot of traffic stops where they could go bad at any moment. We're there to just watch over and make sure that the officers are safe, make sure that that the call goes smoothly. And we got this feedback that from those officers in the field who said, "Hey, it's real nice to just know that you're there and watching over me." So lots of really great stuff, and it's just so exciting to see it unfold, especially now that we're out doing it and operating programs for some agencies. It's nice to actually feel like I'm doing something hands-on rather than just talking about it. As much as I love talking about it.
Well, it's really interesting. The first thing that the DFR does is it increases the safety of everybody involved, the responders, the people on the scene. It improves operational effectiveness. By 25% on average of the DFR programs across the board are returning units to service before the first ground unit arrives on the scene. Wow, that's incredible. And then what's really been amazing is that real-time situational awareness, as you all have seen. And then the last thing is it has proven to be one of the biggest de-escalators in that world for law enforcement. So when you're looking at that, it's really important. But Michelle, from your perspective, what are your thoughts on the other side of looking at this from a questionable standpoint, privacy and other things? What are your thoughts?
So there's a few, Charles, and we've all heard about, Big Brother and privacy and what gives you the right and yada, yada, yada. I'm actually not paying much attention to that at all anymore. At first it was eating at me. It was a real problem. I thought, what could we possibly be doing to upset these people so much that they would think that we're spying on them when we're trying to do public safety actions? But I mean, I'm over that now. What I'm more interested in is where the negatives are for the public safety community on using drones in their mission execution. So we've heard a lot about the benefits. I'm trying to make notes, but you guys are throwing them out there faster than I can write. I would be interested, though, in understanding where we still have work to do. What is it that's not going so well? And where are there either the tech problems or, I don't want to talk about authorization yet. I know that's still a massive issue, but Are there tech problems? Are there TTP problems? Are there just training interpretation problems or something else that I haven't thought of yet? Because those are the areas that I think we need to dig into so that we can start finding a path to shifting them from a problem to an asset.
But before we go there, let's get Matt. You got any experiences recently that stood out in your experiences?
So the first thing I want to say is Officer Hickman that's here with me, come over here. He is the one that has written all of our waivers. So I don't want to lose in that fact that we have someone on our team that's writing our waivers. And so I just want to acknowledge that because that's great for us to have somebody on our team that can help take care of that. And we were talking, one of the stories from DFR last fall was we had a report of a subject that was carrying a gun, is what they said. And he was walking near train tracks. So we flew the drone down there and we were able to locate the subject before officers got there. And it turns out it was a radio that was in his hand. And then he had a camera, and he was actually a train enthusiast and was waiting for the train to come through so that he could take pictures of it as it went by. And he had no weapons, no ill will, no ill intent. The drone was able to see that it was a radio and that it was a camera. And so instead of it being a high priority person with a weapon type of run, we were able to relay the information. Hey, this guy's just carrying a radio and a camera. That's what we see with the drone. So obviously officers still have to approach that in certain ways, in the ways that we're trained, but it gives them, it's a de-escalation tool, right? It gives them more information about what's going on as they're arriving, what the drone's seeing, kind of and it also, we were able to exactly pinpoint where he was because the caller kind of didn't have the greatest spot of where he was. So that was one. And then the other one was, it was a hit skip accident, and they got out and ran from the car, and officers were in the area. The drone was in the area, and on the drone, and I think you saw this one, right? You saw the person went from behind one house into a neighbor's house, like ran through the house. And did you go through two houses maybe?
She tried to get in the basement of the first house, ran out the back, and then went to the neighboring house.
And the drone saw her do that. No officer saw her do that. And it was a door that was able to be closed behind a bush. And if the drone hadn't been there and hadn't seen that, no one would have ever known where they went. So that was that we were able to then direct officers to where we saw the suspect go in, and then they were able to go make an arrest.
And David, I think that Michelle teed up the thing about what's next in technology, so it might be something for Matt Sloane to pick up on as to where we go next.
Sure, yeah, and I'd love to tee up. I love that, Charles. And I'm going to hand it to Jason Day, who just popped in as a caller, and see if you want to, I know you had some things to either ask or share, or if you want to spin off of what was just said, since we were continuing down a train of thought. But go for it, Jason.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. It's actually interesting. So listening to what everybody has said so far, I have a kind of a question for the group, and it's all about the collaboration, right? Anybody that follows me, anybody that's been to any of the stuff that I've been to recently, DPS, we're doing a project here in Austin where we're talking about drone as a service and being able to leverage these assets strategically placed along one of our highways that all public safety can leverage together. And it solves some of the problems that Michelle is trying to identify, right? Who's going to do maintenance on the aircraft? How do we lower that cost, that entry to barrier, while being able to scale and have a bigger scope of operations? So the other problem, and Charles is great at addressing this, is fire is not using the DFR model enough. But he's talking about all these new different flavors. Fire's got to be a big part of that. EMS has got to be a big part of that. But why, when you have an area like Fort Wayne, for example, should every single agency go out and buy all of these assets, and why not share them and then just leverage the power, right? But you need all the other pieces. Another gap that we've identified, Michelle, is the intelligent infrastructure, right? Do you have the backbone to be able to support all this, whether it be fiber, satellite, drone detection, airspace awareness? Not everybody can afford all of that stuff, but if we share the cost, we can all do more good with all of this technology. So I'll stop talking, and I'd love everybody's thoughts on that.
Let me jump in first. I think that I've had this conversation yesterday with the department, and I said, look, and Chula Vista has done really good at this, expanding out for the fire service, is flying the fire calls and streaming that. Here's the difference. Law enforcement has a need on a more regular basis to be able to see in advance of what's going on. The fire department doesn't have as many active programs. However, this is the opportunity to work the two agencies together to help share the cost and share the responsibilities to make it happen, and everybody benefits from that. So I would urge the fire departments, anybody from fire departments that are listening out here that have DFR programs, reach out to your law enforcement colleagues and get together to say, how can we make this work for us, and how can we contribute to make the program work for everyone? And for those of you that from a law enforcement side, is reach out to your fire service colleagues and advise them of what you have to offer that could benefit them. And I'll stop with that.
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, we have a really good working relationship with our fire department. We have the arson investigators, so they work a 24 on and 48 off like the regular firemen do, but they are armed in the state of Indiana. They're sworn police officers. So they're the ones that now fly the drones for the fire department when they have arson scenes, but we also assist them on that, and then then they assist us with manpower when we have police incidents. So we work really well there. We also do fly DFR to large fires. We had one last fall that we flew 6 or 8 missions out to help fire with where the hot spots were, where to move manpower to. So we did assist them with that, and our docs are on top of a fire station. So we have done some of that cooperative effort together. And then they come to our training days too every month. So they know what we're doing, and then they can also provide that insight on what they're doing so we can help them better get it to their chiefs. We're using drone sense, so we're piping everything into the battalion chiefs can get it. They can look it up, pull it up on their screens, sharing the video that way. And so that's kind of how we're working together with fire.
Guys, I just want to ask. Oh, sorry, Matt Sloane. I'll let you take it after this. But you may be able to speak to this too. But Zev asked. He's asking about jurisdictional COAs versus like blanket COAs over an entire region. Does that make it harder to do what Jason's sharing about this drone as a service all the way up and down a massive highway? If you have to do these COAs in smaller sections, or what do you guys see there? I just want to make sure, and thanks for the comments, everybody out there. I see them coming in, so I'll try to bring them in when we can. But Matt Sloane, I guess I'll let you speak to that and whatever else is on your mind there if you want to.
Before you jump in, I just want to add one more line to that question there that's along the same topic. All of our COAs say that you have to own the aircraft or lease it for at least 90 days to use it under your COA. If you're doing drone as a service, how are we going to convince the FAA that, hey, I don't own the drone, I'm not leasing the drone, I'm just paying for the service?
Yeah, no, there's a couple of great points in there. Let me just address the fire thing and put that to bed real quick, and then we can jump into COAs because that's a whole separate thing. But one thing I was going to add to what all of you said, Matt and Jason and Charles, is that I think one of the biggest issues is that we don't see fire starting the DFR movement within their territories, but we do see them getting involved once it's started. And I think the big problem there is grants. We've seen this, as I said, I've been doing this almost 11 years, and we started almost exclusively working with fire departments. They were very excited about it. They saw the benefits. It was easy to make the connection between thermal camera, hotspot, fire, easy. But the problem is a lot of the grants that the fire departments use, particularly like the AFG grant, which they use to buy everything, don't cover drones and specifically exclude them in some cases. And so they just don't have the funding mechanisms that we do in law enforcement. As much as we complain about the funding streams in law enforcement, it's even worse in the fire service. And so I think we see a lot of, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but we see a lot of fire sort of jumping on the bandwagon once we get it up and running on the law enforcement side. And I think that's great. I mean, whoever needs to lead the charge, lead it, and then everybody else can jump on. I'm hoping that changes. I mean, it's something I've spent a lot of time in DC working on the Hill, is, you know, specifically on AFG and other fire service related grants. How can we include drones? So that's just kind of my thought there. Another a shout out to Fremont, California as well too, because they were some of the early adopters of fire and police working together on DFR, and I think it works really nicely there. So yeah, I mean, to the COAs, I mean, I can speak to this some. I know Charles probably has a lot of thoughts on this as well too. It doesn't, as far as sharing is concerned and COAs are concerned, it tends to get more complicated when you get outside of a county. If you can do it within a particular county and you have, one county agency sharing with another county agency, it's a little bit easier. Certainly within a city, but there are definitely some barriers there as far as sharing is concerned under a COA. The answer may just be 107, but I think there's a couple of different ways to skin that, and we could probably spend the next hour talking just about FAA authorizations. But Charles, I'll kick it over to you on that.
No, I think that it's very true. I think that, Jason, to your point, I think these are some of the things that we as a DFR working group do and have conversations with the FAA to start saying we need to change what this looks like. And really it depends on the waivers, if it's legislated or if it's within the rules that they can modify. Because here's one example. Under a COA, you can fly to transport hazardous materials from one location to another that we'd use for samples and those kind of things. But under Part 107, you can't. And that's by legislation, that's by law. So that's not waivable. So we have to find out which one of those things are waivable, which ones aren't. And then we have to work with legislators to change some of the laws to get those things to work. As far as the COAs, we also now, what we talked a little bit earlier, Fort Wayne was the first one to get a Part 107 DFR waiver. That does not have a specific designation as to location necessarily, unless you're getting into more specifics of technology. And that's the other part of DFR, which is the technology, the detect and avoid technology. How are you doing if you're going to go above 200 feet? We're starting to see the allowances, especially in Class G or Mode C VAIL operations, of being able to fly at 200 feet with ADS-BN or 200 feet above the highest obstacle and within the U.S. facility map grids, provided that we're in those areas. So that's starting to happen very quickly. But when you get above 200 feet to 400 feet, now you're talking about what are you doing to mitigate the airspace and to ensure that you have safety. And a couple of things that we're starting to see change is a requirement for parachutes on that. And I know that there's some people that are pushing back because the aircraft, a lot of them don't have the parachutes or the docks don't accommodate that. But what we've seen is if you ask some of the people that have DFR programs, they will tell you of pucker moments when aircraft fell out of the sky and they were holding their breath. And when you have an M30T or in one of the bigger aircraft, and it falls on somebody, we can't afford as the public safety to have someone injured seriously or killed in the process. It's not okay. The balance sheet isn't we can risk one to save one. That's not how we work. And the other thing is, if we have one of those incidents, it's going to stop all of us in our tracks to start revisiting what we do as far as safety. The other thing is using ADS-BN as a minimum. And the third piece is adding an anti-collision light on the aircraft, which in my opinion should be on all drones anyway. Anyway, I'll stop with that.
Hey, well, thanks, Jason. That was brilliant. If you want to hang out for a minute, I'm going to swap out for Lieutenant Abrem Ayana with Brookhaven PD, and you let him say a few words as well. I mean, Jason, if you want to hang out for a minute and keep sharing some of your wisdom as well, feel free to. I'm going to literally swap with Abrem here in a second. How's it going?
Good. How's everyone?
Good.
Doing well. Got all the rock stars here.
You got established here, David.
Hey,
you got some legendary people here.
Absolutely. Well, feel free to share, Abrem. If you want to share anything about, some quick comments about your program or a story and or, a question, really ultimately a question to this panel to create more discussion around a challenge you're seeing or something that you think would benefit folks out there that are trying to start a program. Obviously you, Jason Day, Matt, Rowland have established robust programs already, but more perspective, more dialogue would be, I think, helpful to everybody. So
yeah, I'll share a success, and then also got a question that'll maybe might ruffle some feathers, but I really want to get this panel's honest opinion and some advice for people who may be looking to enter this space. So, we started our program in Brookhaven many years ago after Chula Vista modeled the same model. And we've had a lot of successful days here. And last week we had a lot of successes on multiple successes several days last week. And it sparked a conversation between myself and one of our team members about, how important is a program like DFR integrating with a real-time crime center? How important is that to economic development in the city? And one of the things that we realize is, hey, in Brookhaven, we do send these drones to a lot of low acuity events like shoplifting calls. But what we find is those shoplifting calls, we tend to get the property back and return it to the business. And so the business starts to see their loss start to go down. And so there's a benefit for businesses to establish their business in a city that's forward thinking like Brookhaven, because maybe they don't experience as much loss from theft in their stores as other jurisdictions. And so instead of just saving lives, not just isolating it to that, but really it is a quality of life multiplier for public safety. In that same day, we also had a success where someone called 911 saying that there was someone selling illegal drugs in a parking lot. And what would have usually required patrol officers to go out, maybe try to set up some surveillance or make contact to do some sort of investigatory stop. We just parked the drone over here for a couple of minutes and observed 2 hand-to-hand drug transactions. And it wasn't just the drone pilot, but several people in the department logged in and watched that and were like, hey, there's a hand-to-hand. Hey, there's another hand-to-hand. And then they stopped that person who was selling the drugs. They got crack cocaine, methamphetamine, you name it. It was a whole pharmacy of drugs right there in that car. Got that offender, got the 2 people who purchased drugs as well from that person, all off of what we were able to do with DFR. And so those small instances where an agency may not deploy a helicopter or some other asset because it's just not cost effective, we're really seeing drones pay dividends. And so we're making sure people aren't being taken advantage of because they got an addiction issue. Little small basic things that every cop signs up to do the job for. We want to help communities be healthy and safe. We're seeing wins with drones. So,
hey, Abrem?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Also, doesn't this also serve as a deterrent?
Yeah, you would think it does, but to be honest with you, when they're selling those drugs, they're not looking up. They're looking around, making sure there's no one on the ground. Maybe at some point they get hit. But there's been a large debate lately of whether or not 400 or 200 is where you want to fly. And believe it or not, we actually accomplished that at 200. And they never heard us or saw us, but we were successful. And so maybe they start looking up. If not, we'll still be up there, whether they're looking or not. And even if they see us up there, they got to make a determination. Are they looking at me or are they looking at somebody else?
So let me just capture what I think I heard you say, which I've not heard anyone else say. So I appreciate you wanting to shake us up a little bit. It's awesome. That's what we're here for. You talked about making a mapping to economic sustainability through the DFR program. Now, as soon as you said that, my head started to explode with various examples that we've been hearing for the last couple of years that DFR has been in practice, whether it's fire or public safety, law enforcement, what have you. That all ties back to economic sustainability. If we're not losing buildings from fire, if we're not worried that shop windows are being smashed in because they're being robbed blind. All of this is part of economic sustainability. And with that, it goes hand in hand with community growth. So I really like what you did. Thank you, Abrem. This is going to be a thread I'm going to pull on going forward. We should be able to do some analysis that gives us a direct mapping of value of that of that connection. So
Mhm.
thanks. Good on you. Thank you.
Let me actually ask a question there too, because Michelle, you'd be the perfect person to ask this question to. So one of the things that has come up over the years, and I'm not an expert on this, so I'm legitimately asking a question, is how do so for those who don't know, I mean the way that ISO ratings for agencies and communities are determined are based on how many services that community can offer, and then the ISO rating, and in effect, can lower every homeowner's insurance rates. So if you have a higher ISO rating in your community, you pay less for homeowners insurance. And I've always wondered, is there a way that something like a DFR program or even a patrol-based drone program could be factored into those ratings and say, hey, look, this community is making an extra effort to be safe, and then you talk about economic benefit. If my homeowner's insurance goes down because of it, that would be incredible. I don't know the answer, but it's just something I've always thought of.
So Matt, I've actually heard from some of the insurance companies that have said if they can see a trend, if they can start seeing production that there is actually a deterrence, or it's actually capturing and returning, then they would look at that. That's what they determine their risk levels at. So it does play a role in this, but we're still in the early stages of this to figure out how do we produce that. And I think that's something we need to be looking at, because Michelle hit on this, is that the more we can show value out of what this is, one, and you said this, Abrem, from a quality of life situation, one, from a safety aspect, number two, from a life-saving situation, three, from an economic development factor, all those things play into this. And I just want to share one story before we forget this, is that in Chula Vista, the car fire on I-5, there's a video on YouTube. And if you haven't seen it, you need to go see it, because literally they had a report of a car fire I-5, which they don't respond to normally. And it had conflicting information as to location. The DFR drone within seconds identified the exact location and the heavy volume of fire. And the sergeant informed his units to respond to I-5. And they got there and switch over to body cameras. And literally they get there, there's a person in this burning vehicle. They break the window out the back. They pull the person out of the window. And as they pull them out, the car is fully involved. There was not a second to spare. So those are the kind of stories that really make the difference of how this is changing it. But from a law enforcement officer, from all the drone programs we see, we always start off with everybody thinking we don't want a drone program. We think they're toys. They're not really going to do much until they start playing their roles, especially in DFR. Then the question is, where's the drone when it's not there?
Yeah, I think one of the takeaways for me, obviously I feel like I'm the nerd on this call, is to try and find a way to quantify those benefits in a way that would be meaningful for the insurance companies who are determining risk. And there we go with that word again, because it means something different to everybody. Risk means something very specific to the insurance adjusters. So I think I need to go figure out what that really means for them and see if I can put some analysis against it that shows what the trends actually look like against that risk.
Michelle, before you go off, I just think that we need to talk about quantifying in general all the way around.
Yeah. That's what I was just going to say. We have to. That's the most important
battling this thing, haven't we, Matt? We've been going around this thing in circles, but if we could quantify this in a couple different directions, we'd love to have your assistance in that.
Do that.
Yeah, because as Abrem will tell you, and as I'm sure Matt will tell you, it's not always a direct economic, it's not a cost savings, right? I mean, Abe, you've said this for years. It's like, you're not going to save money.
It don't save you money.
It's not going to save you money, but it may save you, money in other ways. Certainly there's obviously more benefit than saving money to it, but, from a money saving perspective.
If we map it to urban planners and economic development organizations, they are absolutely going to see a dollar value associated with this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there is a dollar value that's associated with the fact that 25% of the time you're returning units to service to be able to serve your community, which means you don't have to have more officers to do that level of service. So there is a quantifiable amount. We just haven't figured out how to get the collection of information from everybody and put it into something that says that.
Anybody out there has an idea, please send it to us. Let us start chewing on it.
And let me also say, before we get away from this too, is that what Charles just said is super critical, but it's also important to remember that what we're not saying is drones are going to take the job of officers. What we're saying is we're already 30% understaffed So let's take some of that understaffing problem away, and not, you know, because that's a stigma we fight all the time with our clients is, you know, certainly from helicopter pilots, but even from, you know, patrol drone operators and even just patrol officers is, well, what am I going to do if the drone's doing all the work? You know, what's in it for me? And you know, it's important to know that this is an adjunct tool. It's not taking a job from somebody. There just aren't enough officers who want to do this job, so we got to help with the tools that we've got.
David, do I get to ask my question?
Please do.
No.
Yeah, and we got one more caller when we're ready. But I mean, and Abrem, you know, you can ask your question. Let's dialogue, and then I'm just going to pull up Jake while we're all chatting. You can hang on too if you want to keep adding your thoughts to the pile.
Yeah.
Only if you're going to stir things up, Abrem. Only if you're going to stir things up.
Yeah. So my question is for both of the Matts and anybody who is talking to public safety, who's doing the research about DFR and they want to get in there. Jason talked about that barrier to entry, the chief one being cost. What are you advising agencies who are coming to you all saying, hey, we want to start this program and we're looking at this vendor, this software? You know, Matt, you kind of did it the way we did it here. You did it kind of yourself. You know, you put the pieces together, you did the research, wrote your codes and stuff like that. Matt, you've been a part of it in so many of these operations. You've looked at a lot of these solutions. What is that key takeaway for agencies from your perspective when they say, hey, this vendor, I looked at this vendor, I'm looking at this other one, I heard this, what's your opinion of this debate that these vendors are having over here? Where should I be thinking? What is the one key takeaway that you would tell any new agency who's looking to get into that space?
It's real easy. The answer is very easy. It's don't believe the hype, right? Try it yourself, because, you know, there's a lot, especially now that we've got a bunch of big players in this market. Everybody's saying, oh, my thing can do that, and you know, theirs can't. And the other guy says, well, my thing can do that, and theirs can't. Try it yourself. And, you know, if hope you don't mind, David, but I'll give a little bit of a plug for the DFR Village here. But that's the whole point of what we're doing. In fact, I'm sitting here in the brand new DFR Village headquarters. There's nothing on the walls because we just moved in. But the whole idea behind the DFR Village is that it's free for end users to come check it out. It's here in Huntsville, Alabama. The idea is that you can come out here and you can try 5 different drones. You can try all the different softwares. You can try all the different drones in a box and actually fly them, and not just hear the hype from a salesperson at a trade show, but actually get your hands on it, get out there and try it. And that's all I would say. I mean, Abe, you've tried every single piece of hardware, every single software, you know, and look, none of them are perfect. But, you know, the nice part about where I sit in the industry as a consultant is that I don't make any of it. So I don't have a dog in that fight. And I just say, look, you know, they all have their ups, they all have their downs. So, you know, this one is more expensive, but it does this better. This one is less expensive, but it doesn't do this as well. So just get your hands on it. That's the only way you can actually tell. And then go visit other agencies. I mean, we send people to you all the time to say, you know, go see what they're doing. Go to Chula Vista, go out to Fort Wayne, check out what they're doing. And I know you guys are generally willing to host those folks and let them try it out. So.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. I think first of all is talk to the customers. Talk to your colleagues that are having the systems. Talk to each one of them that has a different system and find out why did they choose what they chose, and then make a better informed decision based on that. Because as Matt said, you can't listen to all the hype. And Matt, you can add to that. Matt.
Well, I was just going to say, when people ask the question of how much does it start a program, the answer that I always give is it's complicated, because everybody budgets from different ways. Software's paid for, whether it's paid for by your drone budget, or for us, we have an IT department with the city. That's what helps us with our software stuff. And then we do the hardware, we budget for the hardware. But when it comes to, you know, if you ask some places what's your budget, they'll give you a number that's just, it'll blow your mind how much it is. But sometimes they're figuring in officer salary too. So officer salary is not figured into our budget. But in some places it is. And then, you know, you have places that are paying for the flying lions or the third party folks that are on the roof and stuff like that. So that makes all those costs, it's hard to just put a number on it. And then, like Abrem said, we've been doing this long enough that there was no playbook when we kind of started putting this all together, except for Chula Vista. So now folks don't have to go to warm Southern California to be able to see Chula Vista. They can go to cold Fort Wayne, Indiana, and they can come see our program if they want. which they have and they do, and it's closer. And we have no problem with hosting folks. But back 2-3 years ago, that was the option, was you went to Chula Vista and, they had tours every day and, people in and out seeing the stuff. And so not only what you said, go to those places, but talk to the vendors, let them show you what they can do, and then use it for what you need it for. So for us, our full drone program is not just based truly on a DFR program. Our full drone program is based on a very robust tactical program, because we're a 110 square mile city. We just don't have the resources to have that many Dock 2s or whatever other solutions out there. So we're covering the downtown area, which is a very busy area. But from a tactical perspective, if we're going to go fly something that's outside of that 2-mile range, someone else is going to do that. And the software that we're using has the ability to integrate all that together so that you can see everything when you're flying it. I mean, you can see DFR and you can see the tactical solution. You can separate them. That's some of the stuff that we look at when we're trying to make sure that what we're using is the best program when it comes to what we're looking for in the future. So not every solution is an all-in-one solution. If you're going to cover your whole city with DFR, that's great. And if you can make that work for you, then maybe your solution is different than our solution. And that's the beauty of competition too, is that it makes everything better in the end, because now you have all these companies that are competing against each other. And when Abrem's not happy with the software he's using, he says, this other one's got it. And next thing you know, the one he's using it might have it, right? Because they're competing with each other. We're all seeing what the different ones have to offer. And so it's kind of making everybody better in the end.
And one more thing, with the choices that you have now with more departments, look at a department that's similar to you and your operation, your airspace, because that's key.
Yeah,
That's I'll let you go, Michelle, and then I was going to pass to Jake to do a quick intro and ask some questions, because I pulled them up just now because this is where we went just now is very relevant to what he was calling in about. So go for it, Michelle, first, and then Jake.
So I just want to wrap this in my head, pulling all of this stuff together and just kind of boiling it down. I'm hearing that not all DFR are alike. And that is going to be a hindrance when it comes to figuring out common costing. So we actually do have to be more clear about what we mean about the DFR program itself, that there are, like we said at the very beginning, like Charles was saying, there are many flavors. It's probably time for us to start unpacking that so that you all can have a meaningful cost model that allows you to go to your budget folks to get something that is relevant to your mission. So I wanted to make sure that I'm capturing that, because that plays right into the drone as a service concept that Jason was talking about. If we don't have the right costing model, getting drones as a service is going to be hell as we try and figure out all of the moving parts there.
The good news is it's somewhere between 10,000 and 10 million to start a drone program. So that narrows it down a little.
All right, Jake.
Hi, Jake Koch here from LaPorte County Sheriff's Office, Northwest Indiana. So we're between Chicago and Michigan. I see my big brother from Fort Wayne down there. He experienced some weather the last few days as well. Today is actually our drone training day. Our monthly training day. We do the second Thursday of every month. Due to the weather and the past couple months, we've had some procedural stuff to go over. So we've just kind of been in the classroom. December, I went to Jason Day's UAS management class, and that's kind of why we're revamping, reorganizing, and just kind of tightening up, restructuring our program and our procedures and things. So we're also switching our logbook, our report management system. So we went over a lot of that stuff in detail. But anyway, we do not have a DFR program here currently. We're the second largest county in the state of Indiana per square mileage. We're 520 square miles. I know I've talked to a few people about this regarding DFR, and maybe even, Jason Day was talking earlier about collaborating with other agencies, sharing our resources. But just having our drones on patrol and in different divisions has helped us out tremendously. Our community has benefited from it. One incident that kind of stands out in mind to me that we dealt with, we had a vehicle pursuit. The car ended up crashing, guy took off running. We would have never found him without that drone. He was out in the area, like 3 foot tall grass. He was laid down, had a coat over him. It was somewhat cold out. It was nighttime, but that drone, it was a perfect scenario. And the operator did a great job utilizing the radio and transferring information over to the officers that were walking through the grass coming up to the suspect. I mean, they were within, a foot of him and didn't see him. With the thermal, with the heat transfer, you could see, him throw his coat up. He stood up. It actually still looked like he was laying on the ground. But that was a perfect scenario, something that we've dealt with. We utilize our drones for tactical support, indoor operations, a lot of crash scenes, mapping crash scenes, search and rescue, suspect searches. But as far as DFR, I wanted to ask the panel about, how do you get over the area that we have to cover? My thought would be maybe just high traffic, high crime areas if you're able to get a few. But I'll kind of pass it off from there.
Yeah, I'll just give you my opinion to start off with, but that is definitely where I would start, is where the high traffic, high volume call locations and times of day. And so if you have particular problem areas, of course, eventually more drones and more places and docks and long range fixed wing aircraft and all that, maybe, but to start out with, certainly what is the biggest problem spot and when is the biggest problem time? Different programs operate different chunks of the day, and so it's important to kind of pull the crime stats and say, okay, look, this is the epicenter of what we're talking about. Let's find a good rooftop there, and that's where we start. But I'm sure everybody else has opinions as well.
Yeah, I agree. And Michelle, this is to your point, is that Matt just hit on something really important, is that not all of them operate all the time. Mm-hmm. Some of them operate weekends. Some of them operate on a certain day and in certain times of day because of crime and activity. So that, again, all these different elements play into what's the value proposition and what's the cost.
Yeah, I think you're introducing a way that we can calculate a bias, because, they're not all going to be 100% all the time. Got it.
And I would say that if you're looking at a large area, where do I start? You don't have to cover the whole area, right? Just like you said, start small, figure out how you're going to do it, how you're going to man it, how you're going to have folks be able to fly the drones. Is it going to be paid for with overtime people? Is it going to be paid for with civilians? Is it, who's going to staff it, and just kind of get that initial groundwork down on what this is going to look like. And then from there you can expand. But if you start in an area that has a lot of calls for service and the drone's flying, and then you start getting some wins, that's when you can go back to your commanders and be, hey, we were able to do this with the drone. The drone saw this radio instead of a gun. We were able to find this person. We were able to, when the drone's instantaneous, and it's able, especially from a dock setup, and you can launch that thing right away and get it to that call for service and get that win. That's going to help expand the program in the future, in my opinion.
Do any of you have anyone in your department who is translating those wins into tangible benefit? Anybody?
I can tell you the programs we're operating, we're making sure to keep track of all of those and aggregate them. Some want to talk about them publicly, others don't. But it's definitely one of the biggest things for us is we got to document the wins, because the wins are what get the future budget. It's absolutely critical.
Yeah, I'll just add, if you want to really look at one, look at Montgomery County, Maryland. Mm-hmm. Montgomery County, Maryland's in a very high area, complicated airspace. They have their representatives on their, I guess, their board of supervisors that are fighting as to who gets the next DFR drone in their district because of the wins that they've shared and that they're sharing with their community, and their community loves the program. So getting those wins out there is really important from not only the department's wins, but from selling it to your community. And I just want to add to the beginning, any drone program that you do, you need to have an outreach program with your community before you even start and get them involved in it to make sure you've got the transparency, that you've addressed the privacy and all those things.
Nice. Jason, I know you came off mute.
Yeah, I had a question. It's actually, so Jake brought up a good word, and that's the word training. And this is actually something that came up today. So we just got our waivers for, BV Lost, no visual observer at the Capitol here in Austin, as well as our tactical training center, which is 1,300 acres in the middle of nowhere. But our waiver for tactical training center said it was the exact same language as all the other stuff, right? It was authorized for public safety operations where the deployment of the UA is deemed a critical component to protect human lives or property. Well, that wasn't the point of that waiver. The point of that waiver was this is just for training, so we can train our people before they go to the Capitol. And I got on the phone with the FAA, and they're like, "Oh, that makes a whole lot of sense. Nobody's asked us for that before. We'll write that in here." So what is everybody else doing to train officers or firefighters or whoever to do DFR operations, which are incredibly risky, especially for new people, before you allow them to go out there and do this stuff on their own? Over.
Unfortunately, we've got a mixed bag. There is no standard curriculum at this point that's acceptable nationwide. And so everybody's doing their own thing. If you want to look at probably the biggest standardization of anybody out there is the National Wildfire Coordinating Group, because of the wildfire situations, which we're now starting to get into where local and state can be involved in that, but it's also been just federal agencies. Everybody else is kind of doing their own thing. And from a DFR perspective, it's usually from a company that does this particular service that's either going to train or provide the people that do that. So that's one of the big things we have to work on, Jason. I think that's one of our biggest priorities is establishing a standardized curriculum for all these different levels. And we need to have a base curriculum first, and then we need to look at how do we put in endorsements for specializations outside that foundation first, but we don't have the foundation yet.
Nice. And we're coming up to the hour. I just wanted to shout out again for DroneResponders, Charles Werner, and everything they're doing. Go look them up. Google DroneResponders. Check out the event coming up at Busch Gardens in Williamsburg, Virginia in March. We'll have a booth set up there, Echodyne. I mean, I think a lot of us will be there. You'll see, different friendly faces, and we're just there to learn about these topics, collaborate, hear from panelists and speakers around the topic of drone as first responder and how we can expand it together. So I just want to make sure we shout out for that one more time. Really quick. So we've just got like 1 or 2 minutes left. We've got some amazing questions in here. Can we just do like a 30-second answer to these really quick? We got one from Elizabeth Quillen. She's actually in Virginia with Department of Corrections. And she said she's interested in linking up with anyone who has a DFR program in a correctional setting. Just wanted to see if anyone had a quick shout out for that.
I don't think there's anybody in the correctional facilities that I'm aware of. There are some private security companies that are looking at some of this types of service. So I think Elizabeth's going to be at our conference. So Elizabeth, come and talk to the people there. And I know her from Virginia. So I hope to see you there at the conference.
Sweet. Yep. Awesome. And then on the community aspect, Chris said, essentially for drones for law enforcement, how do you involve the community specifically? He says, how could drone pilots within the community support emergency efforts? Can pilots register with law enforcement or use assets within the community? I thought that was a great question.
So there is a mixed bag on that. For example, Campbell, California uses the CERT program, the Community Emergency Response Team, where they have volunteers that actually come in, they train and are part of it. So that can be a part of it. The best thing to do is what they're saying here is reach out to your respective community. If they don't have a drone program, you might be able to offer something and provide services that don't exist and that they don't have trained people.
That's a good point. Add some value right off the bat. All right. Last question I want to try to tackle is this fellow asks us if there's safety concerns for officers becoming aware of their surroundings while they're looking into a screen to pilot their drone. Any suggestions, maybe a visual observer? How can we improve safety for the officer? I guess the one that's actually flying the drone itself.
I don't speak for everyone, but I will tell you, you need to be aware of your surroundings, and you need to make sure that you're protecting the person that's actually doing that, so that you're creating that safe space. A visual observer is a great idea because you are focused a lot on the screen, and that means you're not looking at what's happening around you, and you're not looking at the aircraft in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I think that goes back to what Jason was sharing earlier, that magic word training. That can absolutely be baked in.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for your time. We're going to end on the hour. I know people need to drop, but we'll see you again next week, 1 p.m. Eastern for This Week in Drones live. And we'll talk to you all again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, everyone.